Phil Harris and Josh Phegan come together in an incredible fortnightly podcast, Dream Big, Move Fast.
A progressive, contemporary conversation on what it takes to be a dynamic thinker, leader, and role model.
Backed with over 2 decades of friendship, trials and tribulations that teach from real-world experience and what it takes to dream big, move fast. The great intersection of life, doing something you love to do, that you can get paid really well for, that you can become the best in the world at. Jim Collins. Phil, this is probably one of my favorite quotes of all time. And the big lesson about it is that, like, ultimately have a look at that and say, hey, you know, in residential real estate, we don't get paid by the hour, we get paid on result. The other conversation is that it is actually something that you can learn to love to do. You're not sitting behind a computer. You're out there in the real world. You're in lounge rooms. You're getting to meet some amazing people. And sometimes you meet some people, Phil, that you're really glad you're not married to, right? And then off the back of that, this is actually an unbelievable profession that no matter whether or not you've been in it for 6 minutes or whether or not you've been in it for 50 years like my dad, you can always be striving to become the best in the world at what you do inside of residential real estate. What are your thoughts about the quote? Where does it lead your mind? What are some of the things that you think about?
Yeah, I think it's a really reflective quote because, Josh, if I think of, you know, some of the best agents in Australia that you work with and that I'm good friends with, like one of the key, I guess, leading indicators of people who are great at what they do, there's just this continual strive for improvement. So yes, there is a desire to be the best, but there's also this kind of internal competition that when you are passionate about something and you do love it, every day is about coming into the business and the best operators I know, they're continually pulling their business apart, looking for incremental improvement at absolutely everything they do. Some of those key benchmarks are, you know, commitment to ongoing training. So you see the same familiar faces that are rocking up to training and engaging, same people attending those same conferences, the same networking groups of people. They're just continually on that pathway of wanting to improve. So I think, yeah, the quote really sums it up well.
You know, the big thing about it, though, you have a look at our journey and, you know, beginning, and we started a lot on learning our listing presentation and sending that to each other and listening to it and all those things. And mate, the level of commitment that we had, you know, on day one to wanting to get better was insane. And, you know, later on in life as a trainer, you kind of hear people go, oh, you know, you must make lots of money because no one ever implements what you ask them to do. And I'm like, well, they're not my clients, because our best clients actually really do move to execution. They don't believe in implementation, they believe in execution. What are we actually going to get done? And I remember you and I, we would go to a training event or we'd see something and we'd go, hey, Phil, what about that new diagram or that new stat that we can actually put inside of our listing presentation? And it was there the next day. Like, you know, we were back in the lounge room trying that out straight away. Whereas a lot of other people are like, oh, you know, I don't know if that would work here in Adelaide, or maybe that's, you know, just a Sydney thing, or, you know, oh, no, that would never work here in Auckland. You know, and like literally you've already got the barriers up before you're prepared to give it a run. How much was experimenting, failure, risk, an important part of you being able to build the sort of organization that you've built today, and literally building some of the great salespeople that you've seen around the world?
Definitely the learning or the separator that I would say is, I think what you just said is very, very true. It seems that the great divide now is that the information, the resources of what it takes to, you know, either be successful as a real estate agent or as an agency, that's no longer the secret sauce anymore. There's plenty of podcasts and there's plenty of trainers and plenty of resources that are actually available to get out there and become a great agent or run a great agency. But as you said, that separator is people who actually get good at implementing. And I think it's not only being great at implementing, but what I've learned over the years, Josh, where I think that the real magic happens is identifying that every idea is a great idea. You can walk away from a conference with, you know, a book full of, you know, great ideas. But I think one of the key skill sets that we're starting to see emerge amongst the better leaders and the better operators is actually working out what's just a good idea versus which is a critical one that actually needs to be implemented into that business. And so those individuals and agencies that have that ability to take good ideas and put them into actual realities in their business, they're clearly the individuals that are winning in the real estate space. And
also too, making sure that you're taking on the ideas that are actually going to substantially multiply result, and not just things that are going to complicate process. So, okay, great. If you have a filter and you say, okay, great, will this make us an extra $1 million in fees? No, it won't. Okay, great. Well, then don't do it.
Yeah. And what are the leaders do? We regularly have, as you know, groups of agents come do some study tours inside our organisation, and you know, and they were, you know, blown away by some of the things we're doing. This, and this. And, you know, where do we start, Phil? I said, well, at the end of the day, it's a grotty, grindy business. Like, your whole thought process as a business leader in real estate is ultimately, what are you doing every day to make the process of prospecting, listing and selling for your agents easier? Like, just that's it, full stop. So don't get carried away with the flashy data screens and the reporting and all of these things are great. But how do you make it easier for your agents to pick up the phone and prospect more? How do you equip them with better skills so that they are better at listing at the kitchen table?
Yeah.
And how do we provide better skills so they're better at getting at price adjustments and working with buyers? Like, that's it. That's your fundamental role as a business owner. So I think identifying, what's a good idea versus no, this is actually going to have an impact on bottom line or top line revenue.
Yeah, so Phil, this is a great segue into where today's conversation is going to go. And it's a really interesting one because you think about horizons of focus, right? And both of you and I probably saw a guy by the name of David Allen, I think wrote a book called Getting Things Done. You actually saw him live. It was on my goal list, but you saw him live.
Yeah, I saw him in Sydney, GTD.
I'm not sure you needed to do that, but the interesting conversation around what we learned with that is he talked about horizons of focus. So 50,000, 40, 30, 20, 10,000 feet, zero ground running. Basic idea, 50,000 foot, let's go 25 years out. What does life look like? Down to 10 years, what are we doing? Next 5 years, what are we doing? Okay, great. What am I doing this next 12 months? What am I doing this month? What am I doing this week? What am I doing today? What's on in the next hour? And if you think about it, most people in society, I think, are probably in a position that they don't have much of a plan. Most people are probably in a position that they're looking about what they're going to be doing today, and they're sucked into the drama or the current crisis of today. Now, we've had some crises over the last couple of years, haven't we? There's the watermelon crisis, the mincemeat crisis, there's all of a sudden the inflation crisis, there's the cost of living crisis, like everything's become a crisis. And you live in a world where fast media, fast social media is going to be in a position, a lot of clickbait is actually designed to get people into this spin of not really getting to where they want to go. But if you pull up into the horizon, right? So, Phil, I've got a home loan and I believe you've got one as well. So if we think 25 years down the track, our plan is pay off those loans and we own that property. Fantastic. That's a 25-year goal. 10-year goal, you've got some beautiful children in your life now, and as those kids grow up, you've probably got a 10-year goal to probably get them out of the house or definitely into university or some of those things. Then in addition to that, you've probably got a 5-year goal, and for most people that would be like buying a car maybe and paying that off. It might not be the best investment vehicle, but some people do that. Then you might have a 12-month goal. What do I want to write in GCI? And you come down to what are we doing this quarter, this week, this month. In terms of that, the problem for a lot of people is that they're looking at success, and over the last 12 months, as the group certificates come in, they're a bit worried because they're not writing the level of income that maybe they wrote during the course of one of the most incredible booms that we actually saw. When money was free at 0.1% cash rate, it was like, wow, you went out there and caught the cash. And even in markets like Adelaide, you started to see really significant growth after almost a decade of not much. And the interesting thing is that everyone thought that they were incredible and like the wind was at their back. And it was an old school American quote that, any turkey can fly in a hurricane. Hey, guess what? The hurricane's over now, baby. So what you got to start thinking about is, okay, great. What does it actually look like? So one of the things that I heard from you very early on and I didn't do much about, and then recently reheard again and thought, wow, I need to go and do that. And it's been a real game changer, was actually creating a bit more of what we've got to call like a balanced scorecard for success. So I think that a lot of agents are very much in the initial early days, probably once they start to get a bit of success, are very GCI related. And when the GCI comes off or the income comes off, all of a sudden, like literally they spin out of performance zone into survival zones, and they literally start to get worried about what's actually going on because they're not really having a look at the success. And, and I hope you don't mind, but over a decade of working specifically and watching you grow what you grew, there were eras there where you didn't feel successful, because the income that was coming in and that you didn't have a new Range Rover in the driveway or whatever it was and whatever the dreams were at the time, you just didn't feel that level of success. Do you want to talk to us about what some of those feelings were like and then what you did about it to change your perception of what success looked like, and now, what you've learned and what you wish that maybe you had known a decade ago, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because you and I were talking about this a little bit earlier on today, like we're in an industry that is primarily geared by top-line revenue. So everything in the real estate space, so every award that is either handed out to a company or an individual in real estate, and not picking on the franchises, but just saying that's like the awards-based model is on, if you wrote 200 GCI, you're a part of the XYZ club. If you're at 300K, you're an XYZ club. Franchise fees are based on top-line revenue, not on bottom-line profitability. So, there's plenty of quotes around, what is it? Revenue is vanity, and whatever.
Profit's sanity.
Profit's sanity, whatever it might be, right?
Yeah.
So, the entire industry is geared towards those levels of, generating revenue as opposed to, actual profitability. But so I think, definitely in the early years, so it's very easy to get caught up in that, particularly in our real estate space. It's very easy to get caught up in what awards you're winning, or, top line, commission written, or how many staff you've got, how many employees you've got.
And then that's a really easy metric to judge success by, right? So all of a sudden, okay, great, I know if I'm good or I'm not. And then I start to build momentum, I get my confidence up, and I go from 20 grand a month to 50 grand a month to 100 grand a month. And sometimes I might even hit 300 grand a month once I build a team. And I know that I'm doing that. But on that journey, the next phase in growth is actually say, okay, great, so what are you doing with that cash? Now, this is not financial advice. Please take your own financial advice from your own financial advisor. But the conversation is that you made a decision to say, hey, hang on a second, I think there's more of a balanced scorecard.
Yeah, and I was very fortunate. I had some good people around me that kind of helped me start to say, hey, what about looking at an actual family balance sheet of sitting down with your wife and your family and start putting goals in place. I had a very good accountant who's been a long-term family friend of mine for a very, very long time. We started to sit down and actually doing things, which is actually having proper budgets in place, and then starting to look at, so we have a personal family balance sheet that's got myself on there, it's got my wife on there, it's got our 2 kids plus our 3rd child's about to be. It maps it out over a 25-year plan of how old everybody will be in certain years. It allocates for the costs of private school fees. It punctures in the assets that we own. It imputes capital growth rates on those assets. So there's actually a forward plan to say, here's where the family's actual personal wealth and balance sheet will look like over a 25-year journey. And then when you have that level of clear sight, Josh, you're able to sit down with my wife and actually say, well, the goals that we have as a family, whether that be for a holiday home or whether it be for holidays and all of those sorts of things, it's a matter of saying, well, the goals that we have, do they actually align with the behaviours and the incomes that we're earning to actually sustain that level of lifestyle and goals that we have in place, which is that level of detail and planning is probably very counter what our industry actually maybe offers and promotes.
And ultimately, it often can come down to the lack of education or low education requirements to become a real estate agent. And, that's not here nor there. It's just the conversation. It's the truth. And you say, okay, great. Well, most people are not really akin to having a quick look at business finances and what that actually looks like. So let's talk about some basic documents and why they're important. So the first one that you probably become aware of is something called a profit and loss statement, right? So profit and loss is usually based on your revenue and minus your expenses. So as an example, if I earn $100,000 a year, what does it cost me to live? Let's say, for example, that I've got some rent, I've got a mortgage, and I've got some car payments, and I've got a few things coming out, and I've got to go and buy the groceries, and I've got to pay the electricity bill and the gas bill and all of those things. That's all about expenses on a personal level. So I might have 100 grand a year coming in, and I got 90 grand's worth of expenses. I got 10 grand left over in surplus, and I don't have to spend that. I can actually save that. And that's where I think the biggest challenge is that what we find is that as income rises, so too do expenses. So what I learned very early on in coaching salespeople was that the first 40 grand a year is just getting by. The next 40 grand you earn per year is actually getting by with a bit more style. The next 40 grand a year, no one knows what happens to that. The next 40 grand a year after that, maybe you start to think about some savings. And the next 40 grand after a year of that, then you actually start to do some investment. And it's crazy, isn't it, that you could need to get to $160,000 in basic income before you actually start really thinking about what it is that you're going to do as an individual. Now, that's interesting because when you think about the revenue side, you've got to start to think about what are your income sources. Now, income is a really basic thing. I can get what I'm earning in terms of my sweat. So I'm out there doing work and I'm getting paid by the hour or paid on result. The secondary thing is that how do I now build a team and scale? So I've got a couple of other salespeople working inside of my personal business within the brand to actually now be able to get more income, produced into that business. What am I then doing to be able to get some additional income, better known as passive income, coming in from different sources? Maybe I might own some shares and they get me a dividend. I might own some shares in a business and that gets me a dividend and a return. Maybe I'm in a position that I might own some investment properties and I get some rent. Maybe I might own some other assets that produce me some income somehow. And that's one of the first challenges, is to learn how do I diversify my income streams and actually have additional income streams beyond just me working. And we've got a client who's got a thing called Project 31 where he wants to own 31 investment properties so that then that way he can have a rent check coming in every day of the month for the rest of his life. And that's just, it's a different vision, isn't it, about actually understanding what that looks like.
He's also going to have a big land tax bill, but that's okay.
That's true,
yeah. And I think also for the principals tuning in as well, Josh, I'm glad that you spoke about a P&L, and it's been really interesting over my 20-odd year journey now in real estate, and particularly the last 13 in business ownership. Like if you'd asked me what a P&L was on day one, one, I probably would have had to have Googled that for you going back in my first year of business ownership.
Was Google around then?
Yeah, encyclopedia or something. But, it's amazing where I didn't take the P&L seriously when I first started, but it staggers me the amount of business owners that I talk to. They say, tell me what was your EBIT on your last financial year of trading, when somebody doesn't know what even EBIT means, earnings before interest and tax.
Yeah.
They're not aware of that. But also what I'm really amazed by is the number of people that are running businesses in real estate that don't actually run it like a real business.
Yeah.
Meaning they're not paying themselves proper salaries, they're not paying certain staffs, and so they actually don't have an actual operating business that is viable. So I think that's a really key thing for business owners, to make sure that you actually take your P&L really seriously and look at that. But back to the question, Josh, in terms of what those assets are, I think that people should be looking to diversify. I know that commercial property has been something that's been great for us. Myself personally, that's been a really good one. Principal place of residence, we've spoken about that in terms of what you can do. But then also going back to the cultural issues of what you are fighting against. We are fighting in an industry that is purely recognising and awarding based on revenue, not on profitability. And then we've got society that tells you when you go to social media that it's not a great environment that's going to actually encourage you or help you to save and to pay down debt and to increase assets. So we've got competing forces here that are against us as in our profession.
So imagine I go in and I get a photo taken of me at the bank paying another $1 off my home loan. How would that go on Instagram? Like, would I get heaps of likes and comments, all those things, or people be like, oh, whatever, you loser? And that's the challenge, is that we don't look at that. Now, the secondary part, so what I want you to do in this exercise is actually just write down, what are all of your income sources? How do you actually make cash? Let's get the revenue side sorted. And then you've got to start thinking about in getting advice to actually help that to grow as an individual salesperson or as a property manager, any of the people that are in our industry. The second conversation is then around balance sheet. So it's a different one to profit and loss. And your balance sheet is about actually having a look at all of your assets minus your liabilities. So assets, for example, it could be, property that you might own, might be shares that you might own. I know some clients that have got a very significant watch collection. I know some people that have got some very good classic cars. There's lots of ways that you go to build assets, but assets usually appreciate in value as opposed to depreciate in value usually. And off the back of that, then you've actually got some liabilities. Now, liabilities are a really natural thing. You've got a home loan, you've got an investment loan. Some people actually have other liabilities, for example, like a tax repayment program with the Australian Tax Office. Then also in addition to that, they've also got some other liabilities, better known as afterpay. So they've got some of these other debts or even a car loan that are sitting around that. And ultimately, when you think in terms of your asset base, it's not only that, you also have your superannuation. So depending on the age and stage that you're at, you're growing that super, and what does that actually look like? And, this is where the trap for people that are in personal businesses is that as a business owner, there's no requirement for you to pay your own personal superannuation. You have to do it for your employees. And so if you're not attuned to that and you miss out on that for a couple of years, then that could mean that your super balance is well below where it needs to be. So the disciplines are really important. Now, one of the things that you did, which I kind of thought was weird, and now I get it, was that like you look at your personal profit and loss, you look at your balance sheet on a regular and consistent basis. So you actually have that in a document that you can go and have a look at, and you sit down with your lovely wife, Jennifer, and you work through that so that you guys know exactly where things are at. Now, I did this recently and I thought, okay, great, I'm going to go and have a look at it. And I had a look at my super balances and all the above. And I've worked out, geez, I'm really good. My only liability is now on my investment properties. Everything else, it's cash only, all of that sort of stuff. There's great assets that are growing, but you know what, I could do more in asset growth. And so now that's, re-stimulating. What am I going to go and do to be able to get some income to drive towards that and start to think about balance sheet growth? And what I would encourage people to do is to start to take a bit more of a balanced view, because none of this stuff gets better by not looking at it. And often the only time that most people really look at this stuff is that horrendous experience of having to put in an application for a home loan. And if you only do that every 7 or 8 years, you only pay attention to that document every 7 or 8 years to go, I've got to pull it all together, and it takes me days to get it off to the mortgage broker to then get my refi organised. And that's actually where the biggest opportunity. What difference has it made about, A, for you and for people around you that you've taught this principle to, about a regular review around your profit and loss, income and expenses, and a regular review around your balance sheet, around all of your assets and your liabilities, to give you an idea on what your true net wealth number is and what you're doing to grow that every way and every day?
It's been amazing for me, my family, Josh. As I said, it's been really about that alignment with my wife. And so when you've got a one place, and maybe we can get, maybe we get this upload in the show notes or something like that, Josh, for people just to get a copy of it, if you haven't got it, to actually be able to start somewhere, which is to basically, have a one-stop shop that lists all of those assets, that's got a timeline across it, Josh, of showing what those assets will be worth over the next 10 or 20 years. But what it really does, Josh, I think that the one word that I could summarise it, that it gives me confidence to go, oh, far out. Well, as I'm sitting here recording today, I'm 42. By age 62, this is exactly where I sit from a net worth position. By age 62, this is exactly where I sit from a passive income position. And so if you're sitting here today and you've actually got goals about thinking about, how much money do you need to live on? What sort of passive income do you need? You actually get to make decisions in real time to say, I actually need to go out and invest in X amount dollars more of asset with X amount of return if I'm actually serious about that goal of passive income and asset. So very few people actually have that in one clear one-page document of exactly where their assets are and where they will be in a 10-year, 20-year process. And does it actually align with where you want to be so you can actually course correct? So I think when I sit down with my accountant and I go, and I'm making decisions on whether it be acquiring another rent roll or whether it be acquiring another business, it actually fills me with confidence to go, actually, no, I can afford to do this. This is very much in line with what it is that we're trying to achieve.
Traps for young players is, and not only if it happens to you, happened to me in the first year of business. Did a great year, and all of a sudden they go, okay, great, here's your tax bill. Tax bill? Yeah, got a tax bill. Oh, okay, great. And now you've got to pay tax in advance. And now you've got to pay a tax repayment program for the tax that you haven't paid yet that happened last year in your first year of business. Like, no one ever told me about this. And so then I said, hey, this is never happening again. So, 14 years down the track, what are the things that I put in place 14 years ago? Is I said to my accountant, hey, I need a tax savings account. So what's the amount of money that I need to put in that tax savings account every week? That's the automatic draw, pay myself first. So that tax savings account sits there. Secondary part, if I'm going to pay myself first, the richest man in Babylon concept, 10% of everything that I earn, that's also going to go into a savings account that I cannot touch. Then in addition to that, then I'm going to make sure I'm going to get to some simple disciplines. Every Friday night at 5 p.m, any invoice that's come across the desk, whether or not that be a phone bill, electricity bill, whatever, I'm going to make sure those things are paid. Every credit card is going to be back down to zero, so I've got that done every week. And then anything above a certain amount inside of the bank account is going in addition to pay off the home loan. And for me, that was a massive wealth building event because all of a sudden I really got it clear. And it's never a surprise when all of a sudden the tax bill comes in or the GST comes in or the income activity statement as a business owner comes in because I've got those basic disciplines in play. Now, if we've got that right, it's then also about understanding what actually allows you to move into whether or not you're in scarcity mode or abundance mode. And I kind of worked on this thing that, like, if you think about it and Phil goes to me, okay, what does it cost to run your life? And Phil goes, oh man, it cost me 10 grand a month, to pay for mortgages, pay for a car, pay for rent, pay for kids' schooling, whatever. Okay, great. My argument is that if you've got below $30,000 in your savings account, you're in scarcity mode and you're below your safety line. So all of a sudden, if something happens and you can't work for a couple of weeks or you touch wood, but you break your leg or whatever, all of a sudden you guys could be in trouble quite quickly. But if you are in a position that you get to 6 times that, so you have 60 grand all sitting inside of that savings account, you feel much safer. And then all of a sudden, if you get to 10 times and you're at $100,000 sitting in your savings account, geez, it changes the entire way. It doesn't matter if the fridge breaks, you just say, hey, Jen, let's go get a new one. So as you go through the different stages of your career, and different levels of risk and profile and asset base and all of those things and hunger, those levels changes. But I actually just thought, okay, great. What I know is that people that are in scarcity mode have a lack of routine, have poor behaviors, are constantly, just trying to scuttle around, trying to make things happen, bad diet, bad exercise, bad routine, all of that stuff. But people that are literally in that entrepreneurial mode or at least confident above, when you start to move into the abundance world, you do a very specific about why you do what you do. You have an incredible quality routine. You actually start to pay attention to things that matter. So the takeaways from this today for me, and this is a really important subject for people, I dare you to actually go to the detail of what you've done, Phil, in having a review mechanism, whether or not it be weekly or monthly or quarterly, with you and your partner, if you have one, where you guys actually sit down and really get clear about what the financial plan and success actually looks like.
Yeah, and that's probably a good little tip to bring in there is just that routine that we have in our family. My wife and I, we just catch up once a month, Josh, and it's a simple family meeting. I think it's first Friday of every month, I think it is, we catch up and we literally just have lunch at home together. It's a pretty basic agenda. We catch up on where the kids are up to with schooling. There's always a few things to sort out there. There might be a holiday coming up. We're just, Jen's trying to grab me for, it's an hour where we commit to each other to catch up and just talk about family things. So it might be, okay, we're confirming flights or hotels or whatever it might be. But then there is a financial piece to that conversation, Josh, which is just looking at what our income and our expenses, and then looking at that actual balance sheet and forward planning and saying, are we on track or off track with where our financials are at? So by having that little control mechanism in place, so that at least we know that once a month we are going to catch up, we are going to talk about what we spend our money on, how much has come in, and are we aligned with our goals? I've probably been doing that for we've been serious about that maybe the last 5 years, but that's been a real game changer for us, because in your relationship, when you're working together as a team and everybody is on the same page, exactly. So Jen's very aware of what it is that we're trying to achieve, and everybody has their role for the family goals to come together.
So Phil, let's finish off with our favourite little principle. One of my favourite ones, you never list more than you appraise. So I know it's taken me a while to learn this, right? But I worked out the other day that it's very rare for someone to list more than they actually appraise. What are your thoughts on that as a little principle, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to wrap my head around it, but I know what it's telling me. It's about being proactive, and I think to kind of to bring all of this together, it's really, one of the things that you're huge on, Josh, is about goal setting. So have goals that are financial goals. What we've spoken about today is the mastery of our goals. So if you've got financial goals, put it all together into an actual one-page financial plan, so you see your line of sight for the next 20, 30 years around that financial plan. But then if we bring that back to the real estate principle that we're talking here today, at the end of the day, yes, have 10-year, 20-year financial goals, know where you sit, but nothing is more important than breaking it down on a daily basis of what is that daily activity that needs to be done today that links to the long-term future. So ultimately, get out there. You need to know how many properties do you need to appraise and list. It's about if you know what needs to be done today that links up to where you want to be in 20 years' time, I don't need to worry about 20 years because I've got that on a one page of where I'm headed. And provided I hit these numbers on a daily basis, that'll take care of the months, quarters, years, decades, 20 years.
So I think about this and I break it down for people. If you want 5 listings, you're probably going to have to go into at least 7 listing presentations. If you need to do 3 appraisals to find a listing opportunity, that's now 21 appraisals you need to do. 21 plus 7 is 28 appointments that you need to do. Divide that by 20 business days in a month. That means that you're about, let's call it 1.5, either market appraisals or listing appointments per day. So whatever you do, however you do it, land me that every day. And if you do that every business day, the compounding impact of that is 5 listings a month. And if you sell 4 of those, you times that by a 10-month year, 40 transactions, and on a $15,000 fee, it's $600,000. On a $20,000 fee, it's $800,000. You get the idea, and you start thinking about that. That's actually how the system works. So, never be afraid to go where you want to go. And I think about this, the Ray Dalio piece, goal, system, outcome. If you're not getting what you want, there's something wrong with the system. So sit down with your accountant, sit down with your financial planner and say, guys, I'm not clear about where I'm at. Get me clear. Let's build a really simple document for our balance sheet. Let's build a really simple document for my profit and loss. What percentage of my revenue is coming in from me working? What percentage is coming from my rental properties? What percentage is coming from my shares? And you know what, guys, where are we going to morph that in the course of the next 5 years? So what's our plan, man, on how we're going to go and do that? So you can have some delayed gratification and not drive the flash car and have the fear that when the market goes off that it's going to get repossessed, because you actually got everything where it needs to go. Feeling good and ready for more? Thanks for joining us
on Dream Big,
Move Fast.